Hey everyone, welcome to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We're coming to you courtesy of our broadcasting partner, moretalk.tv. And joining me today on the show is Vincent Genna. Vincent is a world-renowned psychic, medium, healer, and a respected spiritual teacher and a dynamic, inspiring speaker. He is known as the Solution Psychic because he not only sees the blocks, he sees the solutions and empowers individuals to stop stopping themselves. Having transcended a tormented youth of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, he dedicates his talents to transform lives by empowering people to believe in themselves and to use their divine gifts to create the lives they desire and the lives they deserve. For more on Vincent and his work, you can visit his website at vincentgenna.com. Vincent, thank you so much for joining us today on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce.
Well, thank you, Brent, for having me. It's actually a privilege for me to be here.
Wonderful. Glad to hear. And I want to start a little bit with your background. I understand that you came from a very tumultuous upbringing, kind of facing a lot of difficult adversity as a young child and a teen. How did you survive all that, not wanting to lash out at somebody at the time?
Well, I have to tell you, Brent, it wasn't that easy to go through all of that. I mean, the torment just took away. It just ate at my ego and self-esteem, and I had nothing left other than my talents. At a very young age, I discovered that I was able to sing, act, and dance. So I started to involve myself into school shows and in choirs and things like that. Even though that caused some people to pick on me more, I at least had something that I could hold on to and grasp onto that just made me feel like there was something special about me, and they were wrong. They were just wrong. And the funny thing is back then I had no idea what it really was. I know what it is now, but there was a voice inside my head, Brent, that I kept hearing that said, yeah, they're wrong. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And honestly, that is that and the talent that I had were the two things that kept me alive. Otherwise, I really would have either offed myself. I was never a violent guy. I was more a lover than, a fighter. That's me. So I know I wouldn't have ever lashed out at anybody and really hurt them. Or, gosh, when I hear some of the horrible things that happen today, like Columbine and stuff like that, I never even had that thought to go in and try to hurt them. And yeah, I know where it came from now, but I didn't know it back then. So my abilities and that voice in my head is what kept me going, Brent.
Absolutely. Well, on a more lighter note, you talked a lot about being a singer and a dancer, and I understand that you were actually in one of the most famous movies made, Grease, with John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. And you also have an interesting story.
That's my biggest claim to fame. But the funny thing about that movie is, yeah, okay, you if you blink your eyes, you're going to miss me, right? But I was still hired as a featured singer and dancer because of some things that I did for them there. That movie actually started the entire process of me having my spontaneous awakening, because that movie caused people to start respecting me. And I went to my 10-year high school reunion a couple of years after that movie was released. And so all of a sudden, kid from a small town, oh, he makes it big. Ooh, Vinny is in the movie Grease. They didn't think I was going to show up at that reunion, but I did. Yeah, at the time I had a chip on my shoulder because I had done something big. But the response I got from everybody was so warm and affectionate. The one kid who caused most of my torment came running up to me and gave me such a hug. And it was from that point on that things in my life began to change that I never expected. And the movie Grease helped that to occur. So that's why it's really special to me.
Yeah, what a fascinating story. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. And coming from this difficult and kind of abusive background, and now, of course, you're a well-respected spiritual teacher and, of course, a psychic medium as well. It kind of begs the question, how were you able to move through this process of forgiving everything and letting things go and working to build up, build yourself back up, your self-esteem and your self-worth?
Yeah, that's a question I get asked all the time. How did you forgive? And I wish I had a miracle answer that I could tell everybody. So now everybody who is ever tormented, they can go out, apply what I say, and there they go. They forgive everybody. But it was more than that, what I had discovered. It At the time that I was going through all of that, like I said earlier, not only did I not want to lash out at them, when I examine it now, when I look back now, I never harbored any ill will or bad feelings towards them to start with, including my own parents. Yes, I hated what I was going through, but I never hated them. And I realized then, as I was growing up, that meant something. There was something special about that. And so it was this spiritual awakening that I had. And it's so funny. My wife and I were just, going through pictures and reminiscing of old times, back when I lived in California after I did the movie Grease. And we realized that this spontaneous awakening wasn't so spontaneous because things were falling into its place all along the way, whether it be because we were drawn to some metaphysical material. I didn't care about what metaphysics were back then, but yet there was some interest. My wife picked up a book. She was telling me about Seth and Seth's material. It's like, oh, what is that? That sounds really cool. So our interest began to peak, still never connecting it to what I had to do with it. All right. None of that mattered. All I knew is I had this guy who was my main tormentor in school. He antagonized everybody to pick on me and beat me up. And at our high school reunion, Brent, like I said, he came up and gave me a bear hug. Well, he stayed by my side the rest of the evening, bringing people over. And from that point on, we became really good friends. I mean, that in itself is amazing. There was no need for forgiveness there. And it was a choice I made. It was a choice. Either I resent this guy forever, or this guy wants to be my friend. Why would I push that aside? So I went with it and I became his friend. And
that's wonderful.
From becoming his friend, the forgiveness just wasn't even a concept in my mind I had to worry about. And love began, compassion began to pour out of me. And this was the second step in my spiritual awakening, is befriending my tormentor. I mean, I'll get to the rest, if you ask me that question on how he caused my spiritual awakening. And that in itself is pretty powerful and inspiring right there.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'd love to dive deeper into this. Mainly just how did you make this transition specifically from being a professional actor and singer and dancer to now your new profession that you've had for years of just being a psychic medium, a healer, an inspirational speaker? Can you pinpoint that transition?
Yes. Brent, I'm 59 years old now, and I still look back in awe, and also in just this thought of, I always wanted to be an actor. I always wanted to win an Academy Award, because then that would show everybody how valuable I was and that I was really worth something. And that was the only thing in my mind, acting, performing. It became my passion, which I actually use today to understand that some people pick up a passion not because it's something that they really came here to do, but it's something that they're holding on to because they need to. They need to grasp onto something to feel good about themselves. So here I was attempting to pursue that. And my friend was having a difficult time in his life. And I didn't know how to help him. As a matter of fact, he didn't turn to anybody. He hid it all. He was the guy who rented the Porsche for the 10-year high school reunion to impress everybody. I mean,
Right.
we've met those guys before, the guy who brags all the time. Well, every time I talked to him, everything was so perfect about his marriage, his high school sweetheart he's married to, beautiful home, beautiful job, beautiful children. Yet something inside of me kept saying, no, that's not right. That's not right. And I don't know what it was that was inside of me that said that, but I kept listening to him. And one weekend, it was so intense that while we were driving home, my wife and I were spending the weekend with him in Connecticut. We're driving back to New York. I started crying. And my wife is going, what's the matter? And I'm like, I know he's hurting. I know that his life is falling apart and I don't know how to help him. And while I'm driving, I can recall the exact moment that we're down on the highway. It didn't make a difference how much traffic there was. I'm crying, and all I kept saying is, God, you've got to help me. I didn't close my eyes then because I was driving. I kept them open, but the intensity was, please, please let me know how to help him. Give me the ability to help him. Recently, while I was writing that for an article, I realized it was odd for me to ask God to help me to help him, rather than asking God to just help him. Help him, you help him. I don't know what to do, you help him. I didn't ask that. And I didn't know then why I would ask, God, help me help him. Within a week of that question, Brent, the world just went crazy for me. It became a Steven Spielberg, Cecil B. DeMille, with the crazy swirling lights around me, with paranormal activity happening in my home, psychics now coming in and telling me that I'm supposed to be this great teacher. I'm now reading people's minds. I'm seeing dead people, and all of this stuff happened within a matter of a couple of months. And it was a whirlwind. My wife, God bless her, she didn't know whether to call the local rabbi, the local priest to have me exorcised, or Bellevue to have me locked up. She had no idea what was going on. All she knew is that all of this stuff was coming out of me, and I was spewing out information, words, knowledge, wisdom. Well, to make that story short, we began to realize something really powerful is going on here. So, Brent, when you ask, how did I make that transition? I think I allowed the higher part of me, this is my theory now, I allowed the higher part of me to take over and make the transition for me. And I feel really blessed that human Vincent decided to go along with spiritual, soulful Vincent. And it was then that I realized all of that acting, all of that performing, my ability to stand in front of people, no matter how many, was to lead up to what I am doing today. And so looking back, even though that was a whirlwind, every single piece just kept falling into place, falling into place, falling into place. And no, it didn't start when I was 5 years old and I saw an angel sitting on my bed. Sometimes I get very envious when I hear some of my clients say they've had experiences when they were young. I wouldn't have thought I was so crazy at 28 years old going through this. But even to the point that this is where I was introduced to Edgar Cayce material. Because I didn't know, I had no idea about this stuff. I had no idea about whether it be past lives and metaphysical and paranormal stuff, all of that stuff, I had no idea where it was coming from, or whether it was true that was coming in my head. And so all of a sudden I started meeting people who were involved in spirituality and new age concepts. And it was one woman who said, you need to understand what you're going through. And she gave me the contact information for the ARE.
Oh, wow.
And my wife and I went there. And this is back in 1986, was the first time I took, gosh, it was Discovering Your Soul's Purpose by Mark Thurston. And for the first time, I felt, oh my gosh, I'm a messenger. I've got a purpose here. I related to Edgar Cayce and his experience himself. He normalized me. His material normalized me. From that point on, Brent, I couldn't get enough. My wife and I were attending as many workshops as we can get to in Virginia Beach, if they were local. Then we found out about In Search of God study groups. Oh my God, that was intense and great. We went to them. Eventually, we began to facilitate In Search of God study groups. And so it completely, Edgar Cayce's material gave me my complete foundation. So when you talk about a transition, there was no transition, there was an evolvement. I evolved from little Vinny, who was so tormented and tortured, into Vincent, spiritual teacher Vincent, who is meant to be in this world and help other people believe in themselves. And it makes so much sense to me now that I went through what I went through when I was younger. And that's the work I do now. All the self-belief was ripped from me as a kid, and I'm instilling that in others now. That's how that whole process went for me. I get tired thinking about that again.
Yeah, it's such a powerful and inspiring message, and it's great to make that connection with the Edgar Cayce material. So what I want to do is we're going to talk plenty more about that. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll dive more deeply into your connection with the Edgar Cayce material, and of course, plenty of other topics. But we will be right back with more from Vincent Genna here on Reflections: The Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And welcome back to Reflections: The Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. On the show, joining us is Vincent Genna. And we were talking a lot about your connection with the Edgar Cayce material and how your evolving spiritual journey has brought you to the Cayce material years ago, back in the 80s. I want to get out of you, because I love asking this question to everybody. What is the thing that really helped you the most from the Cayce material, something that you really, really clung to?
Okay. When I was younger, being Italian, New York, you're automatically a Roman Catholic. And then if you have sons at the age of 13, they're automatically altar boys. So, of course, I was that good Italian Roman Catholic altar boy. And I'm 13 years old. And here again is one of those puzzle pieces I was talking about earlier. And of course, I'm in church and I'm doing all of the things. And of course, just like every other good altar boy, before Mass, then the priest gets in, we're tasting the wine, we're eating the host. Man, it was great. Did all of that. And I'm listening to the Masses, and I'm listening to the priest, and I'm listening to the lessons, and I'm listening to the homilies, and I'm listening to it. And it's like it was repetition and repetition and repetition. And I kept saying they're wrong. I'm 13 years old. And I'm saying they're wrong. And I got very close with the priests, and we used to have conversations. They used to talk with me, and I used to tell them they're teaching God wrong, that God is not like that. Well, one day I even went home, and I told my mother that we had this conversation with the priest, and I told him that he was teaching God wrong. Well, she went off the deep end. She beat the crap out of me because she thought I was the devil incarnate. She's like, oh my God, what are they going to think of us? You're a sinner. All of these things, you know. It's like it was the worst thing I ever said was that the priests were teaching God wrong. And so jump ahead all those years until I'm 28 years old now. And I started reading Edgar's book on Jesus, one of his books, the Lives of Jesus Christ. I don't even remember the exact title right now. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about this man, a man who incarnated all different lives so that he can come back as the man, as the Christ, to be able to show us who we were, not who he was. And it was from that point on, the amazing thing was the first psychic who came in when the process of my transformation occurred and the spontaneous awakening occurred. One of the things she said to me in a reading is that, one, I was going to become a spiritual teacher and that the soul of Christ was around me. He was going to help me with the words. And I was like, whoa.
Wow.
But I loved talking about Jesus and I loved learning about him. And so then when I learned about him through the Edgar Cayce material, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're buddies. I understand. I understand him now. And I use that till today. My relationship, my Christ consciousness, I totally understand what it is, because that is such a prime element. He's such a prime leader in showing us who we are that I use that to emulate. And it was because of the Edgar Cayce material that it didn't make him a non-deity. It made me more that I could be on his level, rather than he was so high up as this deity you couldn't reach. And it was then that I felt he was a brother. And he was a great brother of mine, and we could horse around and we could talk. And yeah, it was the Edgar Cayce material that helped me. That was the most important stuff to me, is how I was able to reframe the understanding of who Jesus Christ was.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And you have a wonderful, intimate connection with Cayce's life, in that one of the foundations of his beliefs was that intimate connection that he had with the Christ. It would,
Right.
he would come to him in visions and dreams, and that really helped to shape his vision of what he was doing with his life.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you where Edgar is deceased, but he's totally alive. His body is deceased, but where he really helped me personally is after I was doing this work. My wife has been with me for 42 years, so she knows me from the beginning when I was 17 years old without this material and all of this within me. My biggest concern was, am I going to use this information and hurt anybody with it? And I used to cry over worrying about that. And then I read There Is a River, Edgar Cayce's life story. And I remember specifically Edgar Cayce sitting in the kitchen talking with his mom, very solemn and concerned. And she was wondering what he was so concerned about. And he says to her, and this is paraphrasing, forgive me, Edgar, but I love you anyway if I paraphrase, what happens if I'm doing wrong? What happens if I hurt people? I'm so afraid of hurting people. And his mother's response back was, Edgar, just because you have that doubt and worry, that means it's coming from a pure place. Because your intention is never to hurt anybody, and that doubt keeps you in check. And after reading that until today, and I preach Edgar Cayce stuff, and you probably have hundreds of members there because of all of the cards I've been giving out from the ARE Association, right? And I tell them, it's the doubt. It was the doubt in me that then made me realize, okay, it's keeping me in check. And as long as I have that doubt, then I know my intentions are good, because I never want to hurt anybody with the information I do have. So I kind of feel like I have something, I'm a kindred spirit to Edgar, because, he's helped me with that. Hey, thanks, buddy, for giving me that. You know what I mean? You make that connection when you have something in common like that. I just felt so good about that after I read that.
Yeah, it's very powerful to find a spiritual teacher who came before you and have those synchronicities with your life. It helps you to sort things out in your own life.
Right. That's why I say he's still alive, because his work is just going on, and it lives in all of my work that I do. So I feel him like he's standing right next to me when I'm doing some of my work, because I quote him all the time.
Right. And I think you said it, you really hit it when you said it lives in everybody else's work. There are hundreds of scholars and speakers and healers who have Edgar's work living actively every day and evolving through their own work, which is, an incredibly powerful tool and something that I'm
Oh,
sure Edgar's very
absolutely.
proud of.
And my mother-in-law and father were both healed of psoriasis because of Edgar Cayce's readings and material, and because of the
Absolutely.
doctor who chose to follow that and was wise enough, and he was able to help both my father and my mother-in-law heal their psoriasis.
Wow. That's awesome. I love to hear stories like that. There's so many of people
Right?
just being
Of
touched by the
course there are.
readings. Absolutely. Well, I want to move on to you're doing an event with Eben Alexander at the ARE, and it's going to be in November, and you will be a keynote speaker. And this is really interesting story because it kind of brings you around full cycle and actually, displays the work, how cycles work through our lives. Because you were once a student of the ARE and, of course, the
Right.
Edgar Cayce readings, and now you're going to be a teacher there. So how do you feel about this, and what does this tell other
Uh,
people?
yeah, again, it these are the types of things I get emotional about. So forgive me, but it's okay. No, don't forgive me. I'm fine. It's okay to show emotion. Um,
Absolutely.
it's such a privilege. Okay, there's a lot of wonderful masters that are out there, but I they didn't get lay my foundation for me, right? After I got involved with Edgar Cayce's material, the funny thing is, I wanted to go to Atlantic University. I was doing everything I could to figure out how to get there, right? I'm an older person. I did not have a bachelor's degree, and it was just at the time that the Atlantic University just got accredited as an accredited university. And so I was on the phone with them, and they were saying, well, maybe we can give some life credits to you, but you really need an undergraduate's degree to do this. And I was like, I've got to teach. I've got to teach there at the Edgar Cayce Foundation. So that's when at least I started the In Search of God study groups that I facilitated, my wife and I facilitated. It kind of gave me the feeling that I was at least doing something. And so that continued. And eventually I, went on to my own thing, always thinking in the back of my mind that, gosh, I would love to give back to the Edgar Cayce Foundation someday. Someday I'm going to teach there. I'm going to be one of their keynote speakers because people need to see where you can start from and where you can end up, all by choice and all by listening to that inner self and believing in yourself. And then the greatest thing about this is it was just one day I decided to send an email in, you know, what's the process of becoming a speaker? And it was just, I don't know, it was a fluke thought. Of course it was an inspiration, but it came to me like out of nowhere. And all of a sudden I get an email response back. We looked at your material, we looked online and your website, we're really interested in you, and boom, 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 one thing led to another. And I'm like, to my wife, Eileen, I'm going to be one of the speakers at the Edgar Cayce Foundation, the ARE. And she's like, are you kidding me? I'm like, no. And I'm speaking with Eben Alexander. Now I'm going to tell you why that is a synchronicity as well. Eben Alexander worked for Duke University. I was a hospice social worker for Duke University at the exact same time he was working there as a doctor. As a matter of fact, I may have had a couple of his patients that were terminally ill. And here I am meeting him, and now I'm doing a workshop with him at the Edgar Cayce Foundation. You can't get more synchronistic than that. So
Yeah.
it was a sign that I was doing the right stuff. You know what I mean? It was a
Right.
validation for me to be a part of this.
That's wow. That's so powerfully reassuring to get that too. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. So you talked a bit about your education, and as of course everyone knows, you're a psychic doing readings and counseling people, excuse me, after everything that you've been through. What was why did you go back to school to obtain a degree in psychology, and then of course your master's in social work? Um, how did that play into your journey? Because now you're doing more of the psychic medium work. What was that process of getting that education? What were you thinking as you were going through that? Did you think I was
Yeah,
gone? This is all heading towards a psychic career, or?
that's a really good question, because it is a couple of steps that occurred, even though, again, I wasn't expecting them. So here I was a practicing psychic first. I started doing psychic readings, and then I was working at a psychic fair part-time while I was still pursuing my acting career, because I didn't let go of that as a full-time career yet. So I'm doing the counseling. The psychic readings, I called it counseling at the time. And I was getting really good at it the more that I did. And it really turned into more of a counseling type of session, right, with people. The other job that I had was again like an entertainer. And I was in an automobile accident. And the automobile accident took away a lot of my physical ability. I was still able to do psychic readings, but I couldn't do this other job anymore, and I didn't know what I was going to do. All of a sudden, when I was explaining, like some of the clients that kept coming back to me, and they were actually like became friends because they came, I never really condoned coming to me that often, but every 3 months or so, I'd wind up seeing somebody. And when they heard of my situation, they said, why don't you become a counselor, a therapist? I mean, he says, I get more counseling from you and benefit from you than I have from my own psychotherapist. And so it made me think, and talking it over again with my wife, we were saying, you know what? To have the credibility of being a counselor, a psychotherapist, a licensed counselor, and getting that training and skill behind me, I don't have to go and hang a palm, as a shingle outside my office door. I want people to take this legitimately, because still back in that time, this was not a world easily accepted. The metaphysical world, yes, a lot of people were involved in it, but it was still hidden behind closed doors and not spoken about freely, even if somebody was intuitive. So I was thinking there was only a certain group of people that I was reaching by doing my psychic readings. If I now go for a degree and I become a licensed therapist, I'm now still using my psychic abilities. I can now pull in a broader clientele. And so I did that. And that's exactly what happened. Now, the funniest thing throughout my entire schooling is right away, and I went to the School of Social Work because it gave me my counseling degree quicker, and I'm able to do the exact same stuff as psychologists do anyway. And my supervisors always said to me, Vinny, you've got to have a sixth sense or something, because you're able to diagnose these students, and accurately, way before I even get a chance to know what they're doing. I worked in the counseling and psychological services at the university I was going to. And I'd walk away laughing under my breath going, yeah, well, that's because I do have a sixth sense. I was picking up on that. And so I combined both, and it opened the door quicker. It allowed for shorter therapy sessions, but there was a problem with that. Following policy, following the guidelines, when you talk with your supervisors and everything, as a psychotherapist, you're not supposed to give the client answers. You're supposed to let them come to them themselves. And for the most part, you wind up sitting there, letting the person talk and talk and talk. And I'm not putting it down at all, because it absolutely is very beneficial. But then months later, even after they thought that they were cured and healed, they'd come back again, some other situation, put them in the slump again, and we talk and talk and talk some more. And I got very frustrated with that, because I knew what their answer was, and they still weren't coming up with it. So it was another auto accident. I don't know what it is with the accidents. When I get back to the other side, I got to ask my higher self, why did I set up having automobile accidents to cause transitions in my life? Because they were a real pain. But it was true. The next auto accident was just in 2008. I was a hospice social worker for Duke. I was counseling full time, but I wanted to do more. Even with the dying people, I knew what their problems were that they were going through. And it was Edgar Cayce's. I still use his chart and the 7 spiritual centers. And I knew, based on the cancer they had, the disease they had, what went wrong in their life earlier. But it was frustrating. I didn't know how to get out of there. I was making a nice paycheck and benefits and everything. And again, I turned to God and I said, God, you've got to get me out of here. And I got to do the work I'm meant to do. A week later, again, bam, I'm off an exit. I get rear-ended by an SUV, a young girl driving it. I hit the back of my neck. I get brainstem injury, double vision. I can't drive anymore. It pulled me out of the job completely, and I'm sitting home doing absolutely nothing. And I'm going, okay, how is this supposed to help?
Right.
All of a sudden, opportunities, people were calling me up because they knew I was a psychic in the past, and they're calling me up asking me if I could do a reading for them. I said, okay. Then another one, then another one. It literally unfolded into me turning this into a full-time business. I said, you know what? This is better because now I can give them the answers. And it's not that because I give them the answers, everything is fixed. Even if they have the answers, they still have to apply it. So why wait 12 years until they come to it themselves? For God's sakes, tell them, you know what? Your arm is broken. That's why it hurts. Now take care of it. So right. I was telling them, you know what? You were criticized all your childhood, and one of your blocks is you're very self-critical. Oh, wow, you know, you're absolutely right. And they get to apply it quicker. So I said, this is it. I'm supposed to do this full time. Then I started getting asked if I would speak places, if I would go into. So the whole thing turned into a full-time career overnight by itself after the universe finally helped me get out of that other job. And then I finally said, that's it, I am ready. And that's how it was a process. It was a car accident. But again, it's the pieces of the puzzle that fit together. And here I am doing it full time. And I didn't have to scrape the sidewalks in order to make it happen. It happened because I let it happen. So that's that answer.
That's wonderful. Vincent, I want to hear more about your spiritual journey and how it brought you to where you are today. But we're going to take a quick commercial break, but we'll be right back with more from Vincent Genna here on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Welcome back to Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Joining us today on the show is Vincent Genna. We were talking about his spiritual journey and how the universe really presents you with opportunities for spiritual growth. And if you run with them and have your ideal-based life, you can really make some incredible things of your life, just as Vincent has shown. Vincent, I want to talk about how, as a hospice social worker, did you ever think that you would make it to where you are right now as you were doing that? I understand that you helped transition over 500 people as a hospice worker. I'm sure that helped to develop your idea of life and death and coping with the metaphysical realm.
Oh, absolutely, Brent. The major thing that I learned from working with the dying, and it doesn't necessarily sound like the most positive thing, but you can absolutely use it to help people. The way you live is the way you will die, guaranteed. And learning about how people die gave me total understanding as to what they needed to change to make them live better. Because when you're dying, and unfortunately on hospice, there's no sweet death. You're on hospice because you've got some long sustaining terminal illness. Rarely is it a sudden overnight type of thing, like a coronary heart attack, in your sleep. No, it's long and sustaining. And while it's that, the defense mechanisms weaken and weaken and weaken. And then being a psychic that I was, and I'm sitting there with the client and I'm seeing a picture of his past, and I'm seeing why this disease, and he manifested this disease. And I would see the picture of him as a little kid, and I would ask questions that I knew about his past, so not to let him know that I knew too much, that I was this psychic, but enough to open the door. I pride myself on the relationship I established. I was one of the rare social workers for hospice that established such incredible relationships. I still have families calling me today, sending invitations for wedding anniversaries, their children's birthdays, that want to keep me involved because of the help I gave them because of a loved one dying. And I was there with them and understood that they had choices. Sometimes we come to a point of no return. Yes, I totally believe we are unlimited. Louise Hay proved that. She had stage 4 cancer. The doctors chalked her off. She went out, did her affirmations, did her metaphysical work and alternative medicine stuff, healed herself almost overnight, and built one of the largest self-help spiritual publishing companies out there now, right? We all know about that. So I know that you can do that. And you're unlimited. However, if you've got such burdens in your past and you don't have the stamina, which most of my patients, they didn't have the strength anymore to fight this, it actually became a point of no return. It was rare, but occasionally there'll be one or two that actually went in remission and went out of it. But they had a different attitude to start with, and they were a little bit stronger than the rest of them. But you can stop yourself from getting to the point of no return. And I learned, and I also learned from that, and I actually developed one of my lectures and workshops is based off of that understanding, that when it comes down to it and people are dying, that's when you find out what they really believe. And I come to understand that most people, the reason why there's problems in the world and they are not manifesting their dreams is because people don't believe what they think they believe. I'm here in the Bible Belt, North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina. The moment I met any of my clients, they felt the need to profess their faith of God and that they believed in this and they believed in that and they believed in this. And as they were getting closer to their dying, all of a sudden, this and that and this and that went right out the window. They were scared. They didn't know whether they were good enough to go to a heaven. They thought they were going to hell. They didn't believe in God anymore. It wasn't as if they were even angry at him. It just all their faith that they constantly, daily professed, I'm a good Christian. I hear it all the time down here. Oh, a good Christian will do this. A good Christian will do that. All of it went right out the window because you see their defense mechanisms weakened. And so when the defense mechanisms weakened and left them, so did their disbeliefs. So did the things that they really didn't believe in went out the window. And now you saw what they really believed. It's like, yeah, I don't condone this, but if you ever want to know what a person is truly like, get them drunk. Because what happens, what does alcohol do? Alcohol suppresses your control mechanisms, right? And then the real person comes out. They're either funny or they're angry, they lash out. So dying does the exact same thing. It releases who you really are. So I use that work today to help people understand their blockages. They don't believe what they really think they believe.
Right. Wow. I would add on to that the only other way to do that I'd say is live for somebody for a year and you'll find out truly who they are. At least from my
Yeah,
personal experience.
right. You can, and unless you're living with them in a fake way. If you're living with them as if you're pretending to
Right,
be
right,
married, you're actually not
right,
experiencing the real person anyway because you're faking it through the entire relationship. Dating
right. Good point.
really matters. And living together as a married couple where you're fully committed, then yeah, you can start to see the things that you wouldn't necessarily like. But I understand where you're coming from. Yeah. Spend time with the
Right.
person.
Absolutely.
Walk in their shoes.
Right. And I want to move on to talk a little bit about your workshops and what people can expect from the ARE talk that is upcoming in November. Your current workshop you've been doing is called Stop Stopping Yourself, excuse me, and Become Unstoppable.
That's
And
right.
you are very passionate about this program, as everyone can tell listening to you. And I understand that you don't even like it when someone wants to change the title. Why is this?
Oh, God. It's, the experience that I have gotten this entire time being involved in the spiritual realm, right? And you get all of these people who are studying all of these things, and there's so many different angles of the spirituality and interpretations, right? So you've got the concept that respect all life, don't even step on a bug, and you've got nothing is negative, nothing is negative, everything is positive, everything is positive, and I'm sitting there going, no, it's not. Okay. A kid just went into in a school and shot a bunch of elementary kids and adults. That is not all right. And so I found naturally that I was the controversial speaker. I don't intentionally contradict my peers, my fellow spiritual authors, but there is some material I believe that they were necessary to bring us to a certain level of spiritual understanding. And yes, so you get all of these different beliefs. A lot of them, people in the lay world call them woo-woo beliefs. So you get these people who believe in everything and that even the negative is okay, everything is okay, everything is okay. You get all of that. Well, I think we're at another level now because there's so much that's going on out here. We need to take more proactive stances. And what that involves is no more coddling, no more hand holding because you're hurting yourself. And I'm not saying you specifically, Brent, but people are hurting themselves. So I'm not going to sit there in my lecture and go, oh, it's okay. It's okay you've been through 3 marriages, and it's okay that you've got diabetes. It's okay. Everything is going to work out perfectly. It's okay. In the long run, it's fine. Go ahead, die. It's okay. No, I'm not going to do that. They've got such walls up. I need to break through those walls. So you come to one of my workshops, the people that are going to come to my workshop for this one, they're in for a real big surprise. I use Mary Poppins. A teaspoon of sugar helps the medicine go down. Well, the medicine that I need to give them, I use a gallon of honey because I make it sweet. I've got music, I've got, meditation, I've got dance. I even sing at my workshops as a form of inspiration, right? And I got all of that because I've got a hardcore message that needs to wake them up. Needs to wake
Right.
them up. And this whole thing that I'm doing with Eben Alexander at that event is that the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God, it is not a place because I still hear amongst the spiritual world and now the new thought world that everything is perfect once you get to the other side. And again, you never have to worry about anything. Meanwhile, I'm a medium and I'm having spirits coming to me crying because they feel bad that they left their children down on earth in such dismay and not believing in themselves. And now the spirit's over here and he has to deal with it. and try to make something better for himself out of that, and figuring out about karma. And then I've got the spirits, the living spirits over here, who never heard daddy or mommy say I love you, and that are coming to me. So I know, I hear what's going on the other side there. That's what Jesus meant. And so I have a whole enlightening workshop for them. It's people always come up to me. I don't mean to be jumping all over, but this is such important information, Brent. When I was a hospice social worker, I was also one of the rarest ones who would tell the patient he or she was dying. People didn't want to tell them that. Their own doctors didn't want to tell them that. And I'm sitting there going, this person has the right to know he's dying, that she's dying. She could make closure. She can finish things. Don't make a judgment for them. So I would tell them that hard news, and they would break out in tears, and then they would hug me and say thank you. So at my Stop Stopping Yourself and Become Unstoppable, do you know what it's like to tell somebody, you don't believe what you think you believe, I'm going to tell you what you believe. You start that way, and at the end, they're hugging me, loving me, and saying, for once in my life, I'm understanding myself. Thank you so much for enlightening me. I was on Coast to Coast radio show a couple of weeks ago, which is an enormous radio. I'd never even heard of it. And then I realized it has 550 affiliates throughout the United States. I was getting emails. That was a 3-hour interview. I was getting emails by the droves of people thanking me for finally saying something that resonated within them. So I'm different in that way. I'm not going to give you anything. I may shock you, but what I say will resonate inside of you, because that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the kid on the streets, just like everybody else was. I know it's resonating inside of them, and it needs to be said, even if it's hard. It's hard love, but it's a tremendous amount of love. And because I love my brothers and sisters. Would you, if you had a brother and he's shooting himself up with drugs, would you turn around and just tell him, it's okay, honey, you'll be fine. Why don't you go get some help?
Right.
You would turn around and you say, what are you doing? You're hurting yourself. I love you so much. I'm not going to let you do that. And maybe that type of love would finally stop him from doing that. That's what I see as a result from my workshops.
Right. And my 2 cents would be your relatability, that people can relate to you and you give it to them in such a friendly, matter-of-fact way. I think that makes you so appealing to everybody, and it's wonderful to have somebody like that, giving that message. I kind of want to wrap up
if you can say anything else about me, you cannot say that I'm not authentic or genuine. I am absolutely genuine in my words and my feeling and my attitude. What I say, I walk my talk. Let's put it that way.
Right. And people feel that. People will, when they get to see you or experience it, whenever there's a speaker like that, and they're not always like that, but when they are, you can feel it when you're with them.
Well, and that's what being an actor. Now, people are worried about, well, he's an actor. Is he really acting? No, actually, I never got that question, but I used my ability as an actor. I was able to grab hold of people's attention and hearts, and I had them in my hands. I could make them cry, I can make them laugh, I can make them smile by the way I presented things, by the way I my intensity, my passion. I use all of that. That's why I have song and music in my workshops. I might as well use my skills and talents for everything to reach you, and that's why they're so powerful and impacting. And it's usually funny because you'll get, if I'm last, you get speaker, me! And it wakes everybody up, and it's amazing, and I love it. I have a good time. I'm a one-man show, Brent. What can I say? A ham. But a spiritual one.
Wow, that's all wonderful, Vincent. Thank you so much for sharing your message. And like I've said before, it's truly a powerful message. You can tell how passionate you are, which I really appreciate that, and just how real you are. And you tell it like it is. You don't sugarcoat it. And I think that's something that people really need today. They really need help with what they're going through, and they need people to be real with them, which is fantastic. So I'm very honored to have you on, and thank you so much for being on Reflections.
Oh, and again, thank you, Brent, for inviting me down here. It's so fabulous to be a part of the Association for Research Enlightenment. I will always maintain that, and I appreciate sharing my message with you and your listeners.
Absolutely. And we're honored to have you part of the ARE family. We hope you'll return for years to come.
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the workshop and the event and hearing the other speakers.
Absolutely. Yeah, we look forward to seeing you in November. So we'll see you here in Virginia Beach.
We'll see you then.
All right. Thanks, Vincent. Don't forget, Vincent is a featured presenter at the upcoming ARE conference here in Virginia Beach. And this conference is entitled Life Everlasting, God's Open Door, and the Continuity of the Soul. This takes place November 7th through the 9th. And of course, you can register now by visiting our website at edgarcayce.org/conferences. On behalf of everyone here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and of course, moretalk.tv, I'm your host, Brenton Bickerstaff, reminding you to stay dedicated to your spiritual ideals. Every obstacle you are presented with is an opportunity for spiritual growth and a deeper understanding. Thanks for tuning in, and everyone have a wonderful week. And now it's time for the thought for the day here on Reflections. And joining us as always is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, thank you so much for joining us on Reflections for the thought for the day.
Thank you for having me, Brent. Always a pleasure to be here.
Of course. And if you can go ahead and read the thought for the day today for our listeners.
I'd be happy to. This comes from reading 254-87. What you find to do with willing hands, do yourself. You know, this is really short and sweet. So I can't tell you how many times in my life I felt like, oh, what should I do with my life? You know, how should I express myself? You know, and I think all of that comes to us. If we just try to stay in touch with our inner self, we don't have to go out and try to find a way to express ourselves. We don't have to find something to do. It's all right there. You know, it comes to us, and then we apply what we've learned in service to others. And again, we don't have to seek that out, because that service to others is the person you're holding the door for, the person that you smile at or have a pleasant greeting with. It is what comes your way. And I don't think there's any accidents there. There's no coincidences. Things are experiences, and people are placed right in front of us so that we can be of service to them and to all mankind.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that point that you made, that it's not so much that you have to go out there and look for things. It's that you have to start with yourself, start with that inner journey, kind of that connection, and things are actually drawn to you, like you said, like a magnet. You just kind of draw exactly what you need to you. And I love that. And you're right. This one really is short and sweet, but it is really powerful. I think it's really powerful today because of kind of the cultural climate that's going on right now. You see a lot of shaking up and a lot of changes that are taking place, and often very rapidly if you look at it in a big picture perspective. What I like about this reading is it's a bit inspiring and very appropriate for the time, in that it says, what you find to do with willing hands, do yourself. I think right now one of the themes that's going on in the conscious strata, especially in the Western world, but it's happening all over, is this drive to make a change. Things are not working, and we need to start changing things. Of course, like you said, it really does start with the inner journey, but I think a lot of people have really been diving deep into the inner journey now, more so than maybe ever. And because of that, they're looking for a way to really bring what they've found inside, let it kind of radiate out into the world. And I think
Yes.
the beauty of this reading is it says, with willing hands, do yourself. And I think a lot of people may be under the impression, myself too, is that things will eventually take care of themselves, and these changes that we're going through the changes will be set into place, and things will get better. But I think the most essential thing is that if you want changes to take place in any given thing, whether it's an inner change or an outer change, I think it's essential to, put in the work, to find that connection inside and see how it radiates outside and draws things to you, and see the changes, the opportunities that are given to you to actually make a change and make an impact on, yourself and other people's lives.
Yes, it comes down to we have to do our part.
Yeah.
And our part will be shown to us. So it's really important to keep in contact with that inner focus, with that divine within.
Absolutely. Stay conscious and always be aware of the opportunities that are presented to you. Absolutely. Well, Bill, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure sharing with you.
Oh, thank you for having me, Brent. Always great to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'll see you next week. Thanks, Bill.
Oh, thank you. Have a great day.
You too.